Hi, it's John Michael with Michael Mortgage Planning at Dart Bank, and we're going to talk about the 4 top things that you need to know about for the future of mortgage rates and real estate from the impacts of the coronavirus. Specifically today, I want to address interest rates and what that may look like. And to really understand where interest rates may be going, it's important to understand kind of the components. But before I say that, let me provide you the facts that I'm going to try to give you information so that you can make your own determination. Based upon any forecasting or modeling, that's exactly what you're going to receive is a forecast, it's an assumption. So my goal by providing you this information is to allow you to make decisions based upon the factors that do make up things like interest rates or the direction of real estate. So having said that, it's important to know that with interest rates, it's really composed of several different factors. Things like what is happening with a risk-free asset like a 90-day Treasury security. Length of time on a bond or a mortgage-backed security has an impact. So for example, a 15-year versus a 30-year, we expect that a 30-year mortgage is going to have a higher interest rate because there's more time involved with uncertainties. Another factor is risk. For example, a U.S. government bond versus a mortgage-backed security is going to have a lower interest rate because we assume there's less risk. In mortgages, they're made up of pools of hundreds, thousands of individual homeowners that have the possibility of a default versus a U.S. Treasury security being backed by the full faith and government of the United States, so less risky. Finally, there is the factor of inflation. Inflation is a big determining factor, and especially for what we're going to talk about for the moment, and how it will impact interest rates. So the more inflation you see in an economy, you would expect higher interest rates. And why that's important and relevant in today's market, I think we can all understand from what we're experiencing immediately, possibly even on a first-hand basis. We are seeing the government right now take actions that is pumping an extreme amount of money into our economy, to the tune of $3+ trillion. That's like things along the lines of your unemployment checks that maybe you or someone you know may be receiving, the Paycheck Protection Program that's being available to businesses, the individual stimulus checks that are being sent out to individuals and families. All that money has an impact of driving inflation. So when you factor that into the formula for interest rates, you can see that it leads to the potential for higher interest rates. The second factor that's real important to understand right now is that the Federal Reserve is going through what is called quantitative easing. You may have heard of it before if you were around during the 2008 crash, where Congress actually passed budgets for the Federal Reserve, and they called them QE1, QE2, QE3, and so forth, to allot fixed amounts of money for the Federal Reserve to go into the financial markets and buy things like mortgage-backed securities, corporate bonds, U.S. government securities, to act as an artificial buyer and prop up the floor and keep those markets from falling or even crashing. Back in 2008, Congress had limits. They passed budgets for what the Federal Reserve could spend. Today, there are no budgets. We have an infinite amount of spending power that the Federal Reserve is utilizing. Matter of fact, to the tune of more than $40 billion per day. They are in the mortgage-backed security market and supporting those bonds to keep interest rates low. So in other words, when they're buying, they're driving up the price, and a price on a bond has an inverted relation to interest rates. So when prices go up on bonds, rates go down, and that's exactly what they're doing. So you have 2 very important factors if you understand interest rates, possible inflation that could drive up interest rates, and the Federal Reserve acting as an artificial buyer that is maintaining higher prices. So if they stop injecting that money in the economy, you would expect rates to go up, just as we would expect money being spent on stimulus packages to drive inflation to also drive rates up. That kind of answers a question towards which way we think rates may go. Now, one of the more difficult parts is when does that occur? When do the Fed stop their spending? When does inflation start to take hold? And those factors are dependent upon, how the Federal Reserve acts as we begin to recover and unwind that debt. So those factors, of course, driving interest rates potentially up and higher in the future, that will have an impact on potential real estate prices because it affects what we call the demand curve for real estate. And that's what we're going to talk about in our next episode. So please subscribe to our channel, stick with us for more information in our next episode.